Let's get started. Story number 1.
I never used to believe in the supernatural. Ghosts, demons, whatever. It all seemed like a way to scare children or an excuse for things people couldn't explain. I was the kind of person who laughed at horror movies, rolled my eyes at ghost stories, and walked through supposedly haunted places with my head held high. That changed after what happened to me in the winter of 2016. I was living alone for the first time in my life. My apartment was nothing special, just a small one-bedroom unit on the third floor of an old building in a quiet neighborhood. It was cheap, and that was all that mattered. The first time I noticed something strange was about a week after I moved in. I had just come home from work, exhausted from a long day, and collapsed onto my couch. The moment I sat down, I heard it, a soft scraping sound, like fingernails dragging across wood. I looked toward my bedroom door, which was slightly ajar. The noise was coming from inside. At first, I assumed it was a rodent. The building was old, and I wouldn't have been surprised if there were mice. I grabbed a flashlight and cautiously pushed the door open. The room was empty. Still, I checked under the bed, inside the closet, nothing. I tried to forget about it, but the noise continued, always when I was alone, always late at night. Sometimes it was the scraping, other times it was soft tapping, not like someone knocking gently against the walls. Then the whispers started. It began one night around 3 a.m. I woke up, groggy and disoriented, to the sound of something faint, almost like the wind. But as my brain cleared, I realized it wasn't the wind. It was a voice, a hushed, broken whisper coming from the corner of my bedroom. I shot up in bed, heart pounding. The room was pitch black, but I could feel something there just beyond my vision. I reached for my phone, fumbling to turn on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness. Nothing was there. But my closet door was open. I knew for a fact I had closed it before bed. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Over the next few weeks, things got worse. I'd wake up to find my closet open, my bedroom door ajar when I had locked it. Small objects, like my keys or wallet, would be in different places. I convinced myself I was just stressed, that I was moving things without realizing it. Then came the nightmares. They always started the same way. I was in my apartment, standing in front of my closet. The door was closed, but something was behind it. I couldn't see it, but I could hear it breathing. Deep, slow, rattling breaths. In the dream, I would reach out, my hand trembling, and touch the door. The moment my fingers grazed the wood, it would fling open. There was never anything inside, but I always woke up gasping, drenched in sweat. One night, the dream was different. This time, when I opened the closet, there was something inside. A figure. It was tall and thin, its skin stretched too tight over its bones. Its face was obscured by shadows, but I could feel its eyes on me, watching. It reached for me. I woke up screaming. After that, I refused to sleep in my bedroom. I started sleeping on the couch, but even that didn't help. One night, as I lay on the couch, trying to force myself into restless sleep, I heard something that made my blood turn to ice. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps moving across my bedroom floor. Then the closet door creaked open. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I just squeezed my eyes shut and prayed. The footsteps stopped at my bedroom door. Then I heard it, a whisper. Right behind me. Come back. I jumped up, grabbed my keys, and ran out of the apartment without looking back. I drove to my sister's house and stayed with her for a few days, trying to convince myself that I was imagining things, that maybe the stress of living alone was messing with my head. But I couldn't ignore what was happening. The final night I spent in that apartment was the worst. I decided to pack up my things and break my lease. I wasn't going to stay another night in that place. I spent the whole day boxing up my belongings, making sure to finish before sunset. I should have left then, but something stopped me. I don't know what it was. Curiosity, stubbornness, maybe even fear. But as I stood in my now mostly empty apartment, I found myself staring at my bedroom door, and I heard it again. A whisper. Come back. I don't know why I moved toward the door. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself that there was nothing there. Maybe I was just tired of being afraid. I stepped inside. The closet door was open. A chill ran through me. The room felt wrong, heavier. Then I saw something that made my stomach drop. The walls. They were covered in scratches, long, jagged marks, deep enough to gouge the paint. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone to take a picture. Then, from inside the closet, I heard breathing, slow, deep, right in front of me. I turned and ran. I didn't stop until I was in my car, speeding away from that place as fast as I could. I never went back. The landlord called me a few days later, angry that I had left without officially breaking my lease. I didn't care. I told him something was wrong with that apartment, that I wasn't the only one who had experienced it. There was silence on the other end. Then he sighed. "You're not the first." That's all he said before hanging up. I don't know who lives there now, and I don't want to know. But sometimes, even now, I wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of slow, deep breathing. And a whisper. "Come back." Story the end.
Story number 2.
I grew up in a small town, the kind of place where everyone knows each other. It was safe, quiet, and nothing ever really happened. But that changed one summer when I was 12. There was a house at the edge of town, an old, weathered thing that had been abandoned for as long as I could remember. The kind of place kids dared each other to go near, but never actually did. Overgrown weeds choked the yard, seeing up, and the windows were either broken or boarded up. The house had a reputation, stories about strange noises at night, a family that had vanished without a trace, and even whispers of a man who lived there but was never seen. My best friend, James, was obsessed with that house. He wanted to go inside, convinced there was something to be found. Maybe old relics, maybe something that explained the town's unease. One day he convinced me to come with him. We waited until late afternoon when the sun hung low and shadows stretched long across the pavement. The air was thick and humid, the kind that clung to your skin. We hopped the rusted fence and stepped through the overgrown yard, our sneakers crunching against dead grass and debris. The front door was locked, but James had a plan. He led me around back to a broken window, large enough for us to squeeze through. I hesitated, but James was already climbing inside. With a deep breath, I followed. The air inside was stale and thick with dust. Sunlight filtered through the cracks in the boarded windows, casting jagged streaks of light across the floor. The house was eerily quiet, too quiet. The air carried a strange, metallic scent. We moved through the house, careful with each step. The living room had old, rotting furniture covered in dust, the walls yellowed with age. Family photos still hung in crooked frames, their glass cracked. The faces were faded, unrecognizable. It felt wrong, like we were intruding on something that didn't want us there. Then we heard it, a slow, deliberate creak from upstairs. James looked at me, his face pale. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. I nodded, my pulse pounding in my ears. We stood frozen for what felt like forever. Then another sound, this time a faint, dragging noise, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. James took a step back toward the window, but something caught my eye, a door slightly ajar at the end of the hallway. It led to the basement. Unlike the rest of the house, the door was pristine, untouched by time. A cold dread settled in my stomach. "Let's get out of here," I whispered. James hesitated, then nodded. But as we turned to leave, we heard it. A whisper, low and raspy, coming from the basement. "Stay." James bolted. I followed, my heart hammering. We scrambled through the window, hitting the ground hard. I expected someone or something to come after us, but the house remained still, silent. We never spoke of it after that. James avoided me for weeks, and when we did finally talk, he just shook his head, refusing to acknowledge what had happened. A month later, James disappeared. The entire town search flyers went up, search parties scoured every inch of the woods, the river, even the outskirts of town. Nothing. It was like he had vanished into thin air. I knew. I knew where he was. I told myself I was wrong, that it was just a coincidence. But deep down, I knew. One night, months after he went missing, I woke up to a sound, a soft, deliberate tapping on my window. I sat up, my breath catching in my throat. James was standing outside. His clothes were torn and dirty, his skin pale and stretched too tight over his bones. His eyes, they weren't right. They were black, empty, like something had hollowed him out. He smiled, not a normal smile. It was too wide, too forced. "Come outside," he whispered. My body screamed at me to run, to hide, but I was frozen. Then he took a step forward, and I saw his hands. His fingernails were broken, caked with dirt, like he had been clawing his way out of something. The smell hit me then, damp earth, decay. I slammed my window shut, locked it, and backed away. James pressed his hand against the glass, tilting his head. His lips moved, but I couldn't hear what he was saying. Then, slowly, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness. I didn't sleep that night. I never saw him again. But sometimes late at night I hear it, the soft tap on my window and a whisper, "Stay." Story the end.
Story number 3.
I never wanted to tell this story. I've buried it for years, convinced myself that if I didn't speak about it, maybe it would stay in the past. But it hasn't. Even now, in the quiet of the night, I still feel it watching. This happened in the fall of 2013 in a small town just outside of Portland, Oregon. I was 22, fresh out of college, and had just moved into my first real home, a small rental house on the outskirts of town. It was old, built sometime in the 1950s, but cozy enough. A single-story place with creaky wooden floors, a drafty kitchen, and a backyard that stretched into a dense cluster of trees. The landlord gave me a great deal on the rent, said the last tenant left suddenly and never came back for their things. I didn't ask questions. At first, everything was fine. The house had its quirks, the occasional flickering light, floorboards that groaned in the middle of the night, the way the wind howled through the trees out back, but nothing unusual. Just an old house settling. Then I started noticing the noises. It would always happen at night, just after midnight. A soft, deliberate tapping sound, sometimes on the walls, sometimes on the floor. At first, I chalked it up to the house settling, but it never stopped. One night, as I was lying in bed, half asleep, I heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. This time, it was coming from the hallway just outside my bedroom door. I sat up, my heart pounding. The sound was rhythmic, almost thoughtful, like someone was standing there, knocking their knuckles lightly against the wooden floor. I held my breath. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. I barely slept that night. Over the next few weeks, it got worse. The tapping grew louder, more insistent. Sometimes it moved around the house, along the walls, on the ceiling, in the corners of rooms where no one should be standing. Then came the whispering. The first time I heard it, I had just gotten out of the shower. The house was quiet, except for the distant sound of cars on the highway. I was drying my hair when I heard it, low, hushed, coming from the hallway. At first, I thought it was my imagination, but then it came again, a faint whisper. Just a few words, too soft to understand. I froze, my body tensed. Slowly, I turned off the hairdryer and listened. Nothing. I convinced myself it was just the wind outside, but that night, as I lay in bed, I heard it again. This time, it was closer, right outside my door. I didn't move, didn't even breathe. Then the doorknob rattled. I bolted upright, my heart hammering so hard it felt like it might explode. The room was dark, the only light coming from the street lamp outside my window. I stared at the door, waiting, listening. Seconds passed. Then the knob slowly turned. I couldn't move, couldn't think. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body was frozen in place. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. I stayed awake until dawn. The next morning, I checked the door. It was still locked. No signs of forced entry, nothing out of place. But I knew what I heard. I started keeping the TV on at night, anything to drown out the sounds. But it didn't help. The whispering continued. The tapping grew louder. Then, one night, something changed. I woke up to the sound of breathing. Deep, slow, right next to my bed. I turned my head, heart slamming against my ribs. There was nothing there, but my closet door was open. And I knew, without a doubt, I had closed it before going to bed. I sat up slowly, feeling my entire body go cold. My breath came in shallow gasps. The house was silent, too silent. Then the whisper came again. This time I understood it. Let me in. I ran. I didn't stop until I was in my car, driving aimlessly through town, my hands shaking on the wheel. I ended up at a diner, sitting in a corner booth, trying to convince myself I wasn't losing my mind. I called my friend Mark, told him everything. He didn't laugh, didn't make jokes, he just listened. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. "You're not the first." I stared at him. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then sighed. "That house, the last guy who lived there, he left in the middle of the night, just vanished, never even picked up his last paycheck from work." A cold chill ran through me. I didn't go back to the house that night. Mark let me crash at his place. The next morning, I went back, only to grab my things. When I stepped inside, the house felt different, heavier, like something knew I was leaving. I packed quickly, trying not to look at the closet, trying not to listen for the whispering. As I was carrying the last box to my car, I felt it. A presence. I turned slowly. The bedroom door was open. I knew I had closed it, and there in the shadows of the doorway, something was standing. Tall, thin, two long arms hanging at its sides. A face I couldn't quite see, but I could feel its eyes on me. Watching. I didn't wait. I ran to my car, threw the box in the back seat, and sped off without looking back. I never went back to that house. A few months later, I got a call from Mark. He sounded uneasy. "They rented the place out again," he said. "Some guy in his 30s moved in last week." I swallowed hard. "Has he said anything?" Mark hesitated. "He's already gone, left everything behind." Neither of us spoke for a long time. To this day, I don't know what was in that house. I don't want to know. But sometimes, late at night, in the silence of my new apartment, I hear it again. Tap, 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 and a whisper. "Let me in." Story the end.
Story number 4.
I don't tell this story often because when I do, I get the same look from people. Half amusement, half discomfort, like they want to believe me but are waiting for the punchline. There isn't one. This happened in the fall of 2015 when I was living alone for the first time. I had just moved into a small rental house on the outskirts of a quiet town in Ohio, the kind of place where neighbors nod politely but mostly keep to themselves. It was a modest one-story house with an old-fashioned charm, wooden floors, a fireplace I never used, and a backyard that stretched into a dense patch of trees. It wasn't perfect. The floors creaked at odd hours, the pipes groaned, and the walls were thin enough to hear the wind howl on stormy nights. But it was cheap, and it was mine. The first sign that something was off came about a week after I moved in. I was lying in bed one night, just about to drift off, when I heard something. A knock. Not on the front door, not on a window, but from inside the house. It was soft, rhythmic, 3 gentle taps. I sat up, heart pounding, trying to pinpoint where it was coming from. Then I heard it again. The closet. My closet door was slightly ajar, just a crack. I stared at it, my breath shallow. My first thought was that maybe I had left a window open somewhere and the wind was causing the door to shift. But there was no wind. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, got up and yanked the closet door open. Nothing. Just my clothes, shoes, and a couple of boxes. I told myself I was being ridiculous. Maybe the house was just settling, old wood and all that. I tried to ignore it, but the knocking didn't stop. Every night, around the same time, I would hear it. Always 3 knocks, always from inside the house. One night, I decided to test something. I knocked back. 3 times. The moment my knuckles hit the wall, the air in the room changed. It's hard to explain, but it suddenly felt charged, heavier, like something was waiting. For the first time since moving in, I felt genuinely afraid. That night, I barely slept. A few nights later, the whispering started. At first, I thought it was the wind again, a faint murmur just outside my bedroom door. But as I lay there, holding my breath, I realized something. It wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from inside the house. I sat up, straining to listen. The whispering was soft, almost thoughtful, like someone muttering to themselves, just out of reach. Then, for the first time, I made out actual words. "Let me in." My body went rigid. The voice was low, breathy, almost pleading. I didn't move, didn't even breathe. Then my bedroom door creaked open. I bolted out of bed, grabbed my phone, and turned on every light in the house. I checked every door, every window. Locked. There was no one there. But I knew what I had heard. I started sleeping with the lights on. The next morning, I tried to shake it off. Lack of sleep, stress, and overactive imagination. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Then, a few days later, I found the first message. It was on my bathroom mirror. A single word written in the condensation after my shower. No. I stared at it, heart pounding. My first instinct was to wipe it away, pretend I hadn't seen it, but something stopped me. That night, the whispering was louder, more insistent. "Let me in." I packed a bag and spent the night at a friend's place. When I came back the next day, my house felt different, like something had been there while I was gone. The air was thick, heavy. I could almost feel it pressing against my skin. I tried to ignore it. I really did. But then I found the second message. This time, it wasn't on the mirror. It was scratched into the wood of my bedroom door. "Don't." I called my landlord that night, told him something was wrong with the house, asked if there had ever been any incidents. He hesitated before finally saying, The last guy left in a hurry, didn't even take his stuff. I asked him why. I don't know, he said. Just packed up in the middle of the night and never came back. I didn't sleep that night. A week passed, and for the first time, nothing happened. No knocking, no whispers, no messages. I started to believe maybe it was over. Maybe whatever it was had left. Then on the 8th night, I woke up gasping. Something was in my room. The air was freezing. My breath came out in short, foggy puffs. I turned my head, and that's when I saw it. The closet door was open, and something was standing inside. Tall, thin, a shadow stretched too long, its head tilted just slightly. Watching me, I couldn't move, couldn't scream. Then it stepped forward. I don't remember what happened next. I must have blacked out because the next thing I knew, it was morning. My room was empty, the closet door shut, but something had changed. The messages stopped after that. So did the knocking, the whispering, but the feeling never left. I broke my lease a week later and moved out. I never told the landlord why, never told my friends the full story. I don't know who lives there now. But sometimes, late at night, I still wake up to the sound of knocking, 3 soft taps, and a whisper, "Let me in." Story the end.
Story number 5.
I never thought of myself as someone who could be haunted. Ghosts, demons, spirits, they were things from stories, nothing more. I've always been the kind of person who looked for rational explanations first. Maybe that's why what happened to me was so terrifying, because even now, after all these years, I still can't explain it. This happened in the winter of 2012, when I was 24 and had just moved to a small town in upstate New York. I had taken a job as a night security guard at a parking garage downtown. It wasn't an exciting job, but it paid my bills. The garage was 6 levels high, mostly empty after 10 p.m., except for the occasional late worker or drunk couple trying to find their car. It wasn't a bad gig at first. I sat in a tiny office with a wall of security monitors, did my rounds every hour, checked to make sure no one was vandalizing cars. The nights were long and quiet. Then things started happening. The first time, I barely noticed. It was around 2 a.m., and I was watching the monitors when I saw movement on the 5th floor. Just a shadow shifting near the stairwell. I figured it was a customer, someone who had parked their car and was heading home late. But when I checked the screen again, the shadow was still there, unmoving. I grabbed my flashlight and went to check it out. The 5th floor was dead silent. My boots echoed against the concrete as I walked toward the stairwell. The air was cold, colder than it should have been. I scanned the area, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. Nothing. I told myself it was a trick of the cameras, maybe a glitch in the feed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been there. Watching. The next night, it happened again. This time, the shadow moved. I was watching the monitors when I saw it. A figure standing at the far end of the 5th floor, near the last row of parked cars. It was tall, thin, barely more than a shape against the dim lighting. Then it took a step forward. I sat up straight, my heart pounding. I could feel the hair on my arms rise. The cameras weren't great quality, but I could see enough. The figure moved strangely, its steps too slow, too deliberate, almost like it was testing the ground, making sure it was real. Then it turned and started walking toward the camera. I don't know why, but I panicked. I grabbed my flashlight and ran out of the office, taking the stairs 2 at a time. By the time I got to the 5th floor, the space was empty. Silent, but the air was thick, like the space had been disturbed. I did a full sweep of the level, checked behind every car. No one was there. But when I went back to the security office, my stomach dropped. The monitor showed the figure again, standing exactly where I'd just been. I felt sick. I started dreading my shifts after that. The figure appeared more frequently, always on the 5th floor, always watching the cameras. It never moved when I was physically there, only when I was watching. Then one night, I made a mistake. I decided to see how close it would get. I sat in the security office, watching the monitors as the figure appeared at the far end of the 5th floor. My hands were shaking, but I didn't look away. It took a step forward, then another, then another. It was halfway across the floor now. I felt I couldn't breathe. My entire body was screaming at me to shut off the monitor, to run, to do anything but watch. But I didn't move. The figure was closer now. I could see its shape more clearly. Tall, unnaturally thin, no distinct features, just a dark, empty silhouette. It was 10 feet from the camera, then 5, then 3, then it stopped right in front of the lens. And for the first time I saw its face. It wasn't a face at all. It was a void, a hollow absence where a face should be, a hole in reality itself. Then the screen went black. I don't remember much after that. I think I passed out. When I woke up, it was morning. The sun was rising, spilling pale light through the garage windows. The cameras were working again. The figure was gone. I quit that day. Didn't even give notice. Just left my keys on the desk and walked out. I never told my boss what happened. I never looked back. But sometimes, late at night, I see it. Not in a parking garage, not on a screen, but in reflections, in glass windows, in the dark corners of my room when I'm half asleep, waiting, watching, and I know it's still there, waiting for me to look too long. Story, the end.
Story number 6.
I don't talk about this often, not because I don't remember it. If anything, I remember it too well, but because I know how it sounds. I know people will think I'm exaggerating, or worse, lying. I'm not. This happened, and it still haunts me. It was 2013, late summer. I had just graduated college and was working as a freelance photographer, mostly doing small gigs, weddings, real estate, sometimes odd jobs for newspapers. Money was tight, and I was willing to take just about any assignment I could find. That's how I ended up in that house. The job came from an online listing. A man named Richard needed someone to photograph an old house he had just inherited from his uncle. He was planning to sell it and wanted pictures taken for a real estate listing. Simple enough. The house was about an hour outside of town, isolated, surrounded by dense woods. I remember the road leading up to it was cracked, half reclaimed by nature, like no one had driven on it in years. When I pulled up, Richard was already there, waiting for me on the porch. He was in his mid-40s, tall, thin, with tired eyes. "Thanks for doing this," he said as he shook my hand. "I'd do it myself, but..." He trailed off, glancing at the house. I followed his gaze. It was a 2-story Victorian, the kind that might have been beautiful once, but now looked like it had been left to rot. The windows were covered in grime, the paint was peeling, and the porch sagged under our weight. "No problem," I said. "How long has it been empty?" Richard hesitated. "Over 20 years, I think. My uncle was a bit of a recluse. No one really knew him." I nodded, unpacking my camera. "Any specific shots you need?" "The usual. Interior, exterior. Just make it look presentable." I stepped inside and immediately the air changed. It was thick, heavy, carrying a faint smell of mildew and something else. Something I couldn't place. The house was untouched, frozen in time. Dust covered everything, from the furniture to the shelves lined with old books. The wallpaper was yellowed, curling at the edges. A grandfather clock stood in the corner, its hands stopped at 3:12. I started snapping photos, moving from room to room. The living room, the kitchen, the dining area. Everything felt off. Then I reached the staircase. It was narrow, steep, leading up into darkness. I turned to Richard. "Want me to get shots of the upstairs too?" He hesitated. "Yeah. Just be careful." I didn't ask what he meant. I just started climbing. The second floor was worse. The air was stale, suffocating. The hallway stretched out before me, lined with doors on either side. Most were open, revealing empty, dust-covered rooms. Then I saw the closed door at the end of the hall. It looked different from the others. The wood was darker, the knob rusted. Something about it made my stomach turn. I took a step toward it, then another. The floor creaked under my weight. I raised my camera, framing the shot. Click. As soon as the flash went off, something banged against the door from the other side. Hard. I jumped back, heart hammering. The sound echoed through the house. I turned, ready to call for Richard, when I saw something in the corner of my eye. A shadow. It flickered for just a second, disappearing into one of the open rooms. I swallowed hard, gripping my camera like a lifeline. "Richard," I called. Silence. Then, footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming from the room where I had seen the shadow. I took a step back, then another. The footsteps followed. I turned and bolted down the stairs, nearly tripping in my rush to get to the first floor. Richard was waiting for me, his face pale. "You heard it, didn't you?" he asked quietly. I nodded, trying to catch my breath. He exhaled sharply. I was hoping it was just me. We left without another word. I never sent him the photos. I didn't even look at them. But later that night, as I lay in bed, my phone buzzed with an email from Richard. The subject line was just one word: look. Against my better judgment, I opened the attachment. It was the last photo I had taken, the one of the closed door. But now there was something in the picture that hadn't been there before. A face. Not a normal face. It was stretched, distorted, with hollow eyes and a gaping mouth frozen in a silent scream. I deleted the email, turned off my phone, and lay there in the dark, trying to convince myself it wasn't real. But deep down, I knew better, because ever since that day, I've felt it. Watching. Waiting. And sometimes when I wake up in the middle of the night, I hear it. A soft knock on my bedroom door, 3 slow, deliberate taps. And then, a whisper. Let me in. Story, the end.
Story number 7.
I used to think horror stories were just that. Stories. Something made up to scare kids, to entertain people around a campfire. I don't think that anymore. Because something happened to me. And no matter how much I try to explain it away, no matter how much I tell myself it wasn't real, I know deep down that it was. This happened in the summer of 2017. I had just moved to a small town in Montana after a bad breakup. I wanted quiet, solitude, a place where I could just disappear for a while. I found an old farmhouse on the edge of town. It was cheap, almost too cheap, but I didn't question it. The landlord seemed eager to rent it out, barely asked any questions before handing me the keys. The house was old, built in the early 1900s. It had character, wooden floors that creaked under every step, wallpaper peeling at the edges, and a massive attic that I never had a reason to go into. It sat on a few acres of land, surrounded by fields that stretched into the horizon. There were no neighbors nearby, just an empty barn and a dirt road leading back to town. It was perfect. At first, anyway, the first night I heard scratching. It was faint, just a soft scraping sound coming from the walls. I figured it was mice. Old houses always have mice. So I made a mental note to buy traps in the morning. But the next night it was louder. Not just scratching, tapping, rhythmic, deliberate. I tried to ignore it, but something about the sound unsettled me. It didn't move like an animal. It was too precise, too steady. A few nights later, I woke up to the sound of footsteps. Not the house settling, not the wind, actual heavy footsteps coming from the attic above my bedroom. I lay there, frozen, listening. The steps were slow, methodical. They moved from one side of the attic to the other, pausing now and then, as if whoever, whatever, was up there was listening too. I told myself it was just an animal. Maybe a raccoon had found its way in. But deep down, I knew better. A few days later, I found the first message. It was carved into the wood of my bedroom door. Leave. I stood there, staring at it, my stomach twisting. The letters were jagged, uneven, like they had been scratched in with something sharp. I ran my fingers over the grooves. The wood was splintered, fresh. I searched the house from top to bottom, checked every lock, every window. Nothing was out of place. That night I barely slept. I kept hearing it. The scratching, the tapping, the slow, steady footsteps above me. And then, around 3 a.m., I heard something new. Breathing. It was faint at first, almost imperceptible, but then it grew louder. It was coming from the attic hatch. I stared up at the ceiling, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. Then I heard something even worse, a whisper. I see you. I bolted out of bed and ran out of the house, not stopping until I was in my truck, my hands shaking as I fumbled for the keys. I drove straight to town, to a 24-hour diner, and sat there until the sun came up. I wanted to leave. I should have left, but I didn't. Instead, I convinced myself I was imagining things. Lack of sleep, stress, and overactive mind. The house was old. Old houses made noises. I just needed to get a grip. So I went back. For a while, things were quiet. Then one night, I woke up to my bedroom door creaking open. I always slept with it closed. Always. The room was dark, but I could see the door slowly swinging inward, revealing the pitch-black hallway beyond. I held my breath, waiting, listening. Then, footsteps. Slow, steady. Coming down the hall toward my room. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. Then the whisper came again. Let me in. I don't remember what happened next. I must have blacked out, Mike, because the next thing I knew, it was morning. The door was shut. The house was silent. But something had changed. There were scratches on the inside of my bedroom door. Deep, claw-like grooves running down the wood, as if something had been trying to get in. I left that day. Packed what little I had, and drove away without looking back. I never went back for the deposit, never tried to contact the landlord. But a few months later, curiosity got the best of me. I looked up the house. Turns out I wasn't the first tenant to leave suddenly. In fact, no one had stayed there for more than a few months in over 20 years. No one knew why. But I think I do. And sometimes late at night, when the house is quiet, when the wind is still, I hear it. A faint scratching sound and a whisper. Let me in. Story the end.
Story number 8.
I haven't spoken about this in years. Not because I forgot, how could I? But because it still feels too close, like talking about it might bring it back. I've spent so much time convincing myself it wasn't real, that it was just my imagination. But no matter how much I tell myself that, I know the truth. This happened in 2012. I had just turned 24 and was working as a freelance graphic designer. Work was inconsistent, so to make ends meet, I took a job house sitting. It wasn't a bad gig. Wealthy people going out of town, needing someone to water their plants, check their mail, that kind of thing. It was easy money, and since I worked remotely, I could do my job from anywhere. Then I got the call from a man named Paul. He was an older guy, probably mid-60s, and he sounded polite but rushed. He said he needed someone to watch his house for a week while he went to take care of some family matters. He mentioned that it was a little out of the way, but he would pay extra for the inconvenience. I agreed. He gave me the address, told me to meet him there the next day. The house was deep in the woods, at least 30 minutes from town. The driveway was long, lined with trees that felt like they were closing in the further I drove. When I finally reached the house, it was bigger than I expected, 2 stories, old but well kept. Paul met me at the door. He was thin, balding, with sharp, tired eyes. He gave me a quick tour, showed me the guest room where I'd be staying, went over the basic house rules. Then, just as he was about to leave, he hesitated. "There's one more thing," he said, voice quieter now. He led me to the back hallway, to a locked door at the very end. "This door stays locked, don't go inside." I nodded, but something about the way he said it unsettled me. He left soon after, and I was alone. The first night was uneventful. The house was big, quiet in a way that made every sound feel amplified. I worked for a few hours, watched a movie, then went to bed. Then around 2 a.m. I woke up. At first I wasn't sure why. The house was silent, the kind of silence that felt heavy, unnatural. Then I heard it, a soft, creaking sound, like footsteps. I held my breath, listening. It was coming from the back hallway, near the locked door. I sat up, heart pounding, and waited. Nothing, just silence. I told myself it was the house settling, an old building shifting in the night. But I barely slept after that. The next day I checked the door, still locked. I tried to shake off the unease, but something about that hallway felt wrong. That night, I set up my laptop in the living room, working late. The house was quiet, just the occasional rustling of trees outside. Then I heard it again, footsteps. But this time, they didn't stop at the hallway. They were coming toward me. I turned, expecting to see someone standing there. Nothing. I grabbed my phone, using the flashlight to scan the room. It was empty. The house was locked up tight, no windows open, no doors unlocked, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The third night was worse. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to ignore the creeping dread that had settled into my chest. Then, a knock, from inside the walls. Not loud, just a soft, deliberate tapping. I shot up, heart hammering. It came again. Knock, knock, knock. It was coming from the locked room. I grabbed my phone, debating whether to call Paul, but what was I supposed to say? "Hey, your empty house is knocking at me?" Instead, I did the dumbest thing possible. I got out of bed and walked toward the door. Every step felt like I was moving against something thick, heavy, like the air itself was pressing down on me. I pressed my ear to the wood. Silence. Then, a whisper. Not loud, barely more than a breath. "Let me out." I stumbled back, nearly tripping over my own feet. My hands were shaking as I scrambled for my bag, throwing my things inside. I wasn't staying another night. I grabbed my keys and bolted for the front door. As I reached it, I heard one last sound, the click of a lock turning. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I got in my car and drove until I saw city lights, until I was surrounded by people and noise and anything that wasn't that house. The next morning, I called Paul. No answer. I tried again. This time, the number was disconnected. I drove back to the house later that day just to see. It was empty, not just unoccupied, abandoned, windows boarded up, the driveway overgrown, like no one had been there in years. I checked county records. The house had been vacant since 1997. Paul didn't exist. I don't know what was in that house. I don't want to know. But sometimes late at night, when everything is quiet, I hear it again. Soft, faint, a knock, and a whisper. Let me out. Story the end.
Story number 9.
I don't talk about this much, not because I've forgotten it. If anything, I've spent the last decade trying to forget. But no matter how much I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, that I was overtired, that I'm misremembering, I know what I saw, I know what happened. And every time I think about it, I feel the same cold dread curling in my stomach, like something is watching. This happened in 2011. I was 25, still trying to figure out what to do with my life. I had just moved to a small town in northern Minnesota, renting a cheap one-bedroom house on the edge of a wooded area. It was nothing fancy, just a little old house with creaky floors and outdated fixtures, but I didn't mind. It was quiet, and after spending years in a cramped city apartment, I was ready for some space. I worked late nights at a bar downtown, usually getting home around 2 or 3 a.m. The first few weeks were uneventful. I'd come home, make a late-night snack, watch TV for a bit, and then crash. The house was old, so it made plenty of weird noises, but nothing I couldn't explain. Piping shifting, the wind against the walls, the occasional creak of wood settling. Then, one night, I heard something different. It was around 3:30 a.m. I had just gotten home, kicked off my shoes, and was standing in the kitchen eating a leftover sandwich when I heard it. Knock. Not from the front door, not from the windows, from inside the house. I froze. Knock. Knock. Soft, deliberate. From the hallway, just outside my bedroom. I felt a cold sweat creep down my back. My first thought was that someone had broken in while I was at work, hiding somewhere in the house. Slowly, I set my plate down, reaching for the heavy flashlight I kept near the sink. I crept forward, every muscle in my body tense. The hallway was dark, the only light coming from the kitchen behind me. I flicked on the flashlight, aiming it toward my bedroom door. It was slightly ajar, just as I had left it. I listened. Nothing. I swallowed hard and forced myself to move. I pushed the door open all the way, scanning the room with the flashlight. Nothing looked out of place. Then my eyes landed on the closet. The door was open. Just a crack. I knew. I had closed it that morning. I stood there for what felt like forever, my breath shallow, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then slowly I reached out and pulled the closet door open. Empty. I exhaled shakily, laughing at myself. Just an old house, I told myself. Just my imagination. I shut the closet door, making sure it latched this time, and went to bed. The next night it happened again. I was half asleep when I heard it. Knock. My eyes shot open. Knock, knock. From inside the closet, I lay there frozen, my body paralyzed with fear. I didn't move. I barely breathed. I listened. Then, nothing. Minutes passed. Finally, slowly, I sat up. The room was dark, the only light coming from the dim glow of the street lamp outside my window. I turned my head toward the closet. The door was open, just a crack. A wave of nausea rolled through me. I didn't remember hearing it open. I didn't remember feeling a draft. But there it was, open again, just enough to see a sliver of darkness inside. I should have gotten up. I should have shut it. I should have grabbed my keys and left the house entirely. Instead, I pulled the covers over my head like a scared kid and lay there, heart hammering, until exhaustion finally pulled me under. I woke up the next morning feeling like I hadn't slept at all. The closet door was still open. I tried to shake it off, but something had changed. The house didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt off. I told myself I was overthinking. I started making sure all the doors and windows were locked before bed. I even put a chair in front of the closet door. It didn't help. The knocking continued every night, sometimes from the closet, sometimes from the hallway, sometimes, horrifyingly, from the walls themselves. Always the same pattern. Knock, knock, knock. Soft, patient. I stopped sleeping. I started keeping every light in the house on, drinking coffee at all hours just to stay awake. My coworkers at the bar noticed. They asked if I was okay. I wasn't. And then one night, it got worse. I had finally dozed off, curled up on the couch with the TV still playing. I woke up suddenly, my body stiff, my skin clammy. The room was silent. The TV was off. I knew I had left it on. Then I heard it, a slow, dragging sound from the hallway. My stomach twisted into a knot. The sound moved closer. Drag, pause, drag. Something was in the house. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Then knock, right behind me. I spun around so fast I nearly fell off the couch, my heart slamming against my ribs. No one was there. But the closet door was open again, wide open. I ran. I didn't stop to pack. I grabbed my keys and sprinted out of that house like something was right behind me. I got in my car, hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the ignition. I drove straight to my coworker's house, banging on her door at 4 a.m. like a lunatic. She let me in, bleary-eyed and confused, but I couldn't explain. I just said I couldn't go back. Not yet. A few days later, I broke my lease. I never went back for my things. I don't know what was in that house. I don't want to know. A few months later, I met the guy who moved in after me. He was a regular at the bar. I asked him, trying to sound casual, if he liked the house. His face changed. "It's fine," he said, hesitant. "Just weird." I pressed him. He sighed. "Sometimes I hear knocking at night from inside the walls." I felt cold all over. Then he said, almost as an afterthought, "Oh, and the closet door in the bedroom, no matter what I do, it never stays shut. I don't know what's in that house, but it's still there. Waiting." Story the end.